Hey guys, I'm making this video because there's nothing on YouTube or in any forums that I've been able to find that would solve this issue. So here's what was happening. This is a 2007 Polaris Sportsman 500 HO EFI. Okay, so what was happening is I would start the four-wheeler and it would start and run fine, but the solenoid for the starter, which is located right here just to the left of the battery, was clicking and clicking and clicking constantly. It was making that sound like you know, if your battery was dead and you went to start it, or if the starter was fried and you went to start it, you would hear the clicking. But in this case, the four-wheeler would start and it would run fine, but what was happening is I could hear that clicking solenoid, and then what was happening is the solenoid would click and it would try to engage the starter while it was running. So my first thought was it must be a bad ignition switch. So I had an extra ignition switch and I swapped it out. It was not that. The second thought was, well, maybe it's this toggle switch here. So I had an extra one of those, so I unplugged it and plugged in a new one. It wasn't that. Obviously, then I'm thinking, well, maybe I've got a bad ground or something. So I actually changed my solenoid because I had an extra starter solenoid. Nothing I did fixed anything. Well, here's what I found out, that there are two wires that come into the solenoid. Okay, they plug in right here. This is off. These two wires come into the solenoid, and one of them, the red one, which I don't know if you can see it, the white with the red stripe. The white with the red stripe, that one goes up to your ignition switch. So when you flip the ignition switch, it sends power. So when you go to start it, it sends power down this red and white wire, which is mostly white with a small red strip. It goes down that wire and engages the solenoid, which sends power to your starter. Well, the other wire is brown, which you can't really see. I'm sorry, it's kind of dark. There's a brown wire that connects right next to it, which when it goes into the solenoid side, it turns into the yellow wire. So it goes from brown to yellow. Well, that wire is the ground. So every solenoid needs a power source and it needs a ground to be able to activate the solenoid. So I knew something was happening. Well, when I tested that brown wire, which should be a ground, I actually get a small amount of voltage through it. So, and that shouldn't be happening. Well, on this machine, it has a solid state breakers. So it's like a relay, but it's actually embedded into the ECM. So so what was happening is clearly the ECM was having some type of a small failure, because it was sending a very small amount of power across that breaker, and it shouldn't be. So that small amount of power that was coming from the ECM was triggering this solenoid to act crazy when the motor was running. So the simple 10-cent fix is to cut this wire here, which would be the brown if you cut it on the other side of the harness, or on the solenoid side it would be your yellow, but basically that's your ground. So cut the ground and then ground it out directly to the frame, and that will cause it to work just fine. The reason why this brown wire, the ground wire, goes to the ECM instead of just grounding to the chassis is because it requires, it makes it so that when your brake switch, which when you know how you have to engage the brake in order to start the four-wheeler, well, when you squeeze that, it sends a signal to the ECM, and that causes the ECM to ground out this wire. So what you're doing by cutting this wire and grounding it directly to the frame is you're bypassing the brake switch grounding inside the ECM. The brake still obviously works fine. The brake lights work fine. It doesn't affect any of that. The only difference is you'll be able to start it now without actually putting the brake switch on, which is actually convenient. So if you wanted to bypass that feature, this is how you would do it. So this is the 10-cent fix. If your solenoid is acting all crazy like mine was and clicking and clicking and clicking while the motor is running, then you need to cut the brown wire, which is your ground, and ground it directly to the chassis, and leave your white and red striped wire, which is your positive, which comes from your ignition switch. And that, my friends, took a lot of ingenuity to figure out, but that will fix it up for you. Good luck, guys. This is another helpful video. If you liked it, please take 2 seconds and comment or subscribe to my channel. This is Corey Wilson from Wilson's Recreation. Thanks a lot.